I live in a small town in South Africa. Near my town, there's a large patch of woods, and since the outbreak of coronavirus, I haven't been inside for quite a long time. Until yesterday, that is. So my friend called me to ask if I wanted to join him and a few other mates to play a game of paintball in the woods. Obviously, I was keen. I got my paintball gear and gun and headed off to my mate's place. There were 6 of us: Chase, Liam, Matt, Joey, Steven, and obviously me. We headed off to the woods but made a few stops to fill up on petrol and get some gas for the paintball guns. When we finally got to the woods, we parked the cars, got in our gear, and ventured out into the forest to find the perfect spot for paintball. Eventually, we got deep enough and to an area with sufficient cover and space to play a good game of capture the flag. We played a couple of games, and since it was winter, it got dark very quickly. We'd planned for this though and brought our flashlights. We decided to play a couple of night games, which were especially hard, especially in the forest we were in as well. During one match, Joey and I decided to sit out because we were both very tired and we needed a quick breather. The others continued to play from a significantly good distance away from us. While we were chilling, I was rolling up a joint. Yes, I'm a pothead. And Joey went to go take a piss a couple of meters away from me. While I was busy rolling, I had the flashlight pointing towards myself since there was no other light to allow me to see what I was doing. Around me, it was completely dark, and I couldn't even see 2 meters ahead of myself because of how dark it was. Suddenly, I heard footsteps coming my way. At first, I thought it was Joey, but I soon realized I couldn't see any light from his flashlight. Now I was more vigilant, but still relaxed, thinking maybe he was playing a prank on me or something. The footsteps stopped a few meters away from me in the dark, so I lifted up my flashlight and pointed it in the direction where I heard them coming from. I scanned the area, but just saw bushes and trees. I just thought Joey might be hiding in the bushes or behind a tree, waiting to give me a good jump scare, when I heard footsteps coming in the opposite direction. When I looked, I could see it was Joey because he was still holding his flashlight. That's when I stopped what I was doing, picked up my flashlight and paintball gun, and when Joey reached me, I whispered, "Bro, I think there's someone over there." Joey obviously didn't believe me and told me to stop being a baby, but he soon regretted saying that. I decided to do one last scan of where I'd heard the footsteps coming from, and to my horror, I saw someone peeking and staring right at me from behind a tree probably only 10 or 11 meters away from us. I just shouted, "What the actual fuck?" When Joey heard me say this, he looked over to me, then when the man looked and instantly jumped up, picking his paintball gun up also. We each stared at each other for at least 2 minutes, but it felt like forever until the man stepped out from behind the tree. He was large, at least 6 feet tall, and was honestly filthy like he hadn't taken a bath in years. He was wearing baggy ripped-up jeans, and just an old dirty zipped-up bomber jacket. Plus, we could see that he was on something, or he was just batshit crazy, and he was holding something behind his back. Finally, he called out, "Hey, what are you guys doing out here when it's so dark?" We couldn't even answer him because of the shock we were in. Joey stuttered with fear in his voice. "We were just leaving." The man nodded his head in disagreement and said, "No, you're not. Your friends are still over there playing the game." I felt a shiver down my spine. "How about we play a game of our own while we wait for your friends?" That's when he finally showed us what he was hiding behind his back. It was a large machete. That's when I knew we had to get out of there. So I aimed my paintball gun, and in the toughest way I could muster, I told him, "Leave now, or I will shoot." Even though I only had 6 or 7 balls loaded, Joey did the exact same thing by aiming his gun at the man, even though he had none at all. The man didn't even flinch, but he did say something that honestly made my skin crawl. He smiled and said, "The game starts now." Suddenly he rushed at us, so I told Joey to run while I fired the last bullets at him. Luckily I shot him right in the head, which caused him to fall, so that was our chance to book it and link up with our own friends. As soon as we started running, we heard him get up, and he actually started to gain on us. We could barely see, but we couldn't slow down because we knew what would happen if we did. We just carried on sprinting our hearts out until we heard other paintball guns being fired, so we knew we were close. Joey started shouting to get everyone's attention, and all of a sudden I heard a huge thud. Joey tripped and twisted his ankle. I turned around to help him up, and when I did, I could see the man running in full sprint right towards us. In that moment, I thought it was going to be the end of us, but our friends heard our screams for help. They rushed over to us, and when they saw the man, they all started firing at him. He knew he wasn't going to be able to take us all on, and he decided to turn around and disappear into the forest. We helped Joey up, rushed to get our stuff, and rushed over to the cars. And when we got to my friend's place, we helped Joey treat his ankle, and I proceeded to tell my friends everything that happened. Everyone was thoroughly creeped out. It's safe to say that the next time I'm in those woods, I'll be a lot more vigilant. First off, for some background information, Workaway is an organization that enables people to volunteer abroad to help others in need, in exchange for food and shelter. More often than not, people on Workaway decide to help others abroad to travel to exotic places. And people that hire Workaway volunteers are often families, couples, or elderly people that are too busy to do basic chores, and therefore decide to shelter Workaway volunteers to take care of these basic needs. This means that oftentimes complete strangers, aka the Workaway volunteer and the host/hosts, will be living together for an extended period of time. This is where things can go south. For some context, I'm 18, and this happened to me just a couple of months ago. It was my first time doing Workaway, and after the 2 days trying it out, I'm 100% sure I don't ever want to do it again. It was one of the most traumatizing events of my life that I'll remember till the day I die. Also, I'm a female, and for context's sake, I've always received compliments on my body ever since I hit puberty, so I'd say I'm definitely at least a little bit attractive. Not to say it's always been rainbows and sunshine for me on an emotional level, though. One day, while browsing on Workaway, I received a direct message from an offer of an elderly couple that needed some help with gardening chores. The account that messaged me had its first name set as Enzo, so I assumed it was the husband that was hiring the Workaway volunteers. Upon inspecting his profile picture, though, I realized it was a selfie of him with a much younger woman, maybe in her early 20s. She wasn't even smiling, and it didn't look like she was even acknowledging that she was in the man's selfie. I didn't think too much of it, and read up on the description. A couple looking for some gardening help, very beautiful view on the ocean, looking for young and strong Workaways for help. Don't forget that swimsuit. The smiley face at the end made it a little creepy, but I probably thought the guy was old and just trying to be funny. They had a bunch of pictures of the house that seemed like a charming small one with a pool and a nice view out onto the beach. It looked like paradise, and it had a very good rating as well, so I accepted. All of it was in the south of Italy, and looked to be overall a really nice place to stay. All in all, I was pretty excited for the opportunity. Fast forward a bit and I arrive at the place. It's kind of like in the pictures, except that the garden was completely run down, as if someone had walked in and destroyed it. I get introduced to Enzo first. He's poorly dressed, and I immediately notice that he's more than a little socially awkward. I also thought, though, that could just be because he could barely express himself at all in English. I asked him where his wife was, to which he responded that she died about a week ago because of cancer. On the spot, I was immediately pretty heartbroken and gave him my condolences, though I was a little skeptical because you don't just suddenly die of cancer in your 20s usually. Maybe they broke up, and he just didn't want to admit it to save face. He was definitely lying about something. As I'm saying I'm sorry for his loss, he looks down as if he were about to start crying, so I awkwardly decide to give him a little hug. While we're hugging though, I notice his hands are a little low down on my back, barely touching my butt. I was wearing a sundress, so I really felt it, but I didn't think too much of it. I brushed it off because he was old and rather short. But this was the first red flag for me. We go inside, and he starts showing me around the house. He keeps telling me that there's a pool in the garden if I want to swim. He tells me this about 3 times, and honestly, it was starting to get on my nerves a little bit. He shows me to my room, and it's a big room with a view on the backyard pool and out to the beach. He showed me his room, which had the same view. Once in my room, though, he also mentioned that there were mice in the attic above my room, and that sometimes they would make a lot of noise at night. I asked him to elaborate, but he didn't answer. I awkwardly looked out the window, and after a long pause of me looking outside and turning back to him to compliment the view, he left my room without ever saying anything. I thought that maybe he hadn't heard me. Fast forward to the next day, and I'm working on the garden, cutting bushes and watering the plants, while he's out on the porch behind me laying down and taking a nap. Or I thought so at least. It was pretty hot that day, so I was just wearing a bikini and a baggy old shirt on top. While I'm bending over to water some smaller plants in the back, I couldn't help but notice that his eyes were wide open, looking right at me. I wasn't that sure he was watching me, so I decided to go water the plants next to him and pretend that I thought he was still sleeping. I bend over and pretend I'm picking something up from the soil. I'm aware that my breasts are more or less half exposed to the baggy t-shirt I was wearing. I quickly and discreetly glance in his direction, and I see that his old eyes are wide open and locked right on. A little disgusted, I stand up and walk towards the side of the house where he can't see me. A couple of moments after that, he went right back inside. I started to get a little suspicious about this guy, but I couldn't really blame him. After all, his wife was allegedly dead or broken up, and it wasn't the first time a guy has looked at me like that. I took this as the second red flag, though. On the second day, Enzo had given me permission to take the day off, so I decided to just wander off to the beach. It was fun and especially beautiful, but it was a little too sunny, so I decided to go back in the backyard near the pool and under the shade of some trees. When I came back, Enzo was walking towards me with swimming goggles in his hand, and he suddenly told me there were small rocks in the pool that I should pick up because he was too old to go that deep in the water. I definitely thought that was a little odd. First off, who has small rocks not so randomly scattered in their pool floor? And secondly, who owns a pool and doesn't have a perch to get small leaves and insects out of the water? But put on the spot, I decided to do the job. I was also already in my swimsuit, so why not, I guess. I put on the goggles, go inside the water, and pick up the rocks. While I'm doing this, he was just standing there watching me. In the water, I could faintly hear the sound of an iPhone recording. While going back up out after picking up the last rock, though, I noticed him on his phone for the first time. He was holding it in the water, with both hands as if he was zooming in on me. Honestly, it was just too obvious. I told him that I was done, and asked him if that was his phone. He replied that he was using it to zoom in on the water because it's waterproof, and he could use it to see the rocks better. I told him it was a great idea, though I didn't believe it one bit. With this as the third red flag and the final straw, right then and there I made up my mind to leave early because I didn't feel safe with this guy. I asked him for a towel since I forgot one, and he quickly jerks away to go get one in the house. While I look at the sea in front of me, I wait for a good 5 minutes before he hands me a towel. I suspected that he was most likely watching me from the upstairs window before actually grabbing one for me. I dry myself off and get to my room to take a nap because I was so exhausted. Once in my room, I looked around for possible hidden cameras because I had started to seriously doubt Enzo. Fortunately, I found nothing though, so I locked my door, took a shower, and went to sleep. I woke up at around 7, and for some reason I couldn't find Enzo anywhere in the house. It was dinner time, so I just decided to start cooking. I called out to him for dinner, and he finally showed up. I asked him where he was, to which he responded that he was in his room, but again, this was a complete lie. I walked past his empty room on several occasions while looking for him. We had dinner, and he kept telling me about how good it was. I kept telling him with everything that's left in me that I was flattered to, which he responded back with a creepy old smile. That night I had some trouble falling asleep. I had obviously locked my door tight, and thus felt safe, but it was an unusually hot summer night. Before coming here, I had this habit of sleeping naked that I stopped doing once I came here, for obvious reasons. I opened the windows to get some fresh air, but it was still too hot, so I subsided to old habits and decided to take off my pajamas to sleep naked. I instantly fell asleep after that. I woke up at around 3 a.m. to some noise coming from the ceiling. It was like faint old wood cracking. I opened my eyes and looked at the ceiling above me. That's when, in the dark, between the planks, I could faintly make out a set of eyes looking down at me. I locked eye contact with Enzo, who was in the fucking attic, and get in full panic mode. I was paralyzed with fear, so I didn't move though. I pretended I was looking at the left side of the ceiling and closed my eyes. My breasts were completely exposed to this creep, so I decided to turn to my side and move the blanket to cover up. For the rest of the night, I was too scared to open my eyes or move, so I just stayed there paralyzed in fear until some sunlight reached in. Morning came, and I was more than ready to just get out of this hell house. When it was around 6 in the morning, I packed my stuff and left the house running. I waited at the train station to get to the nearest airport, but thank God I came out unharmed. That guy was a twisted and seriously sick fucking pervert. This happened to me 6 years ago, and will haunt me for the rest of my life. I grew up in one of the most densely populated neighborhoods in all of North America. This neighborhood was initially supposed to house 12,000 people, but by the time I was 12 years old, it had a population of around more than 30,000. It was one of Toronto's poorest neighborhoods, with 50% of the population being under the poverty line, though the crime rate was not nearly as high as you'd expect something like that to be. The neighborhood was mostly made up of immigrants and refugees, all looking to find a better life, my family included. It was summer break between 5th and 6th grade, and my cousins, who happened to live in the same apartment complex, were at my place watching movies. I was getting hungry, so I grabbed some money and headed for the convenience store to get us some snacks. It was around 7 p.m., so the sun was still up, and there was about a half an hour left of light. The convenience store was only half a block away, so I decided to just walk it. When I got to the parking lot of the residential building the store was in, I noticed a man wearing a black hoodie with horizontal green stripes standing in the corner of the lot. There was nothing too noticeable about the man, except that he was smoking directly under a no smoking sign. Nothing uncommon in that neighborhood. I just found it kind of ironic. I walked up the steps into the cramped convenience store. There might have been 7 people in there, but it looked as if it was already almost full, probably as big as a mid-sized apartment, and was already stocked up to the ceiling. The point is, if anyone entered, everyone in the store knew. I come in, and directly to the left of the entrance is a shelf packed with many different varieties of candy. I was like any other child who had 20 different varieties of candy laid out in front of them, but only had the budget for 2. I was deeply lost in thought. At the exact moment I started to forget about the man who was smoking, he entered through the door. He walked into the nook of the store behind me, where they keep all of the flatbread. I could feel his gaze burning into the back of my head. I quickly decided on the snacks and paid and left. I walk out, down the steps, and to the sidewalk on the other side of the narrow parking lot when I hear the chimes of the exit door behind me. I glance back behind me to see who's exiting the store, and I'm just a shade under petrified when I see the man exit the store, especially when I notice he's not carrying anything in his hands. I quicken my pace just a tad and reason with myself that he must have just bought another pack of cigarettes and put it in his pocket. That idea had barely crossed my mind by the time I was halfway back to my building. I turned around to see if he was still there, and he was only about 15 feet away from me when we made eye contact. He had his hood off, and I could see his face very clearly. He looked to be Afghan. There were a lot of those since the neighborhood was a hotspot for refugees, and at the time Afghanistan was doing really badly. He had scars covering his face and was balding on top. He couldn't have been too tall because he wasn't much taller than 6th grade me, so maybe like 5'4". I spun back around and started to speed up, and at the same time I heard the footsteps behind me quicken. By the time we got to the deep-shaped driveway to my building, we were both speed walking. Remember, it's broad daylight, and there were plenty of people around. A man chasing a kid is weird to anybody. As soon as we hit the split in the sidewalk which separates the driveway and the straight path, I start sprinting at full speed to my building. Luckily, there happened to be someone buzzing in at that exact moment, and I slipped right in the door behind him. I quickly whirled around and pulled the pneumatic glass door shut. When I looked up, I saw the man seconds too late on the other side of the glass. The look on his face still scares me. He stared at me with an expression of pure anger I had never seen before, nor have I ever seen since. I run to the elevators and push the button. The man starts rattling on the door. The expression on his face was still sinister. When the elevator comes down, he began to understand that he wouldn't catch me, and after that, he walked away the same way that he had come.